The resignation or the retirement of the Woolworths CEO, Brad Banducci, it's relevant to raise the question of price gouging and what happens in the markets which are not really competitive. And I'm putting up after this a comment which really relates to a comparison between Australia and comparable countries concerning the control of monopolists and oligopolists. And the fact is we are very soft. Our politicians don't do much in terms of controlling the monopolists and oligopolists. Brad Banducci, by the way, the ABC says that if there's agreement on the fulfilment of all of the targets which he had to undertake, that his payout will be 24 million, which is an extraordinary amount of money. You can't blame him for taking that. That's being offered to him, but it is extraordinary. But it reflects the way in which the system is arranged in Australia so that you do need people to run those systems to continue what was happening in the past. Now, the fact is that in a market in which there's not much competition, and that certainly applies in relation to airlines, it also applies in relation now to insurance. It also applies in relation to supermarkets. And those markets are different from competitive markets because the players in those markets are price makers, which is popularly referred to these days as price gouging. They make the prices. They don't just take the prices as you do in a competitive market where you cannot control the prices. And this can be proven in classical economic theory. It's a well-known fact. But the politicians have been very soft in these, and compare that to the situation in the United States where even in the 19th century, in 1890, they introduced the Sherman Act, and they made non-competitive, anti-competitive actions illegal and punishable by treble damages. You get if you sued for damages under the Sherman Act and you won your case, you wouldn't get what you had in fact lost. You'd get 3 times that. It was meant as a punishment for monopolists behaving improperly. And in addition, there was the ultimate sanction, that is divestiture, that the court could order the break-up of a monopolist or oligopolist. The situation is bad in Australia, as you will see from the coming segment. But let me say this, the politicians have been very weak. For example, just take the insurance industry. In the States, what happened was that there were 2 constraints, 2 controls on price making. One was that a number of players in the insurance field were mutual companies. They were owned by the people who had the policy holders with them or who were members. The NRMA was a classical example of a mutual company, but a number of insurance companies were mutual too. Carpetbaggers came along and proposed the sale of those to turn them into ordinary companies. That happened so that you had a significant segment of the market who constrained the prices taken away. That's why insurance prices are out of control. They also got rid of taxpayer-owned insurance companies, such as in New South Wales, the GIO, the Government Insurance Office. They also were a constraint on monopolists gouging prices in a market. And federally, the federal politicians, Liberal federal politicians, also did the same in relation to Medibank. Medibank was an ideal mutual company. If anybody owned it, it was really the policy holders with Medibank when it was private, when it was made a more private corporation than a public one. But the government decided to sell that to the highest bidder rather than returning it to the policy holders. So we do have a problem in Australia, and I think compared with countries which are similar, our controls to try and make monopolists and oligopolists behave competitively has been very lax, and the consequence is the people are the losers, customers are the losers. And in relation to the supermarkets, the farmers too are the losers. Well, let's look at that segment. I haven't forgotten classical economics. It taught at high school and university. This is that oligopolies and monopolies fix prices to maximize profits. The more concentrated they are in the market, the greater their power is. Knowing human nature, we should assume that, of course, they will use this power, even to engage in price gouging. It's in their nature. We should also assume that it will be in the interest of some politicians not to act on this or to put it off, having a series of inquiries, hoping the issue will be forgotten by the next election. A useful exercise is to compare the Australian supermarket scene with that in the UK. The Guardian, a left-wing newspaper, did this in an excellent report last year on the 27th of July 2023. Unsurprisingly, the Woolworth profit margin is twice as high as Sainsbury's. The Woolworth and Coles duopoly, dominated by Woolworths, controls an extraordinary 2/3 of the Australian supermarket market, with Aldi having only around 11%. The best measure to see if there's any price gouging is to look at their profit margins. If the profit margin is high, we can assume they are gouging the farmers or the public, or more likely, both. This is to cover up their behaviour. They seem to want to get into virtually signalling. This is a distraction, for example, about the Voice referendum, or play to other left-wing politics, telling us how to vote in the referendum and even undermining our National Day. All of this will allow well-rewarded CEOs and directors to skite about their moral virtue at dinner parties and other meetings of the elites. Now, the easiest way to work out profit margins seems to be to compare their EBIT margins. EBIT is earnings before interest and taxes. Just compare Woolworths with Sainsbury's in the Guardian's article. The Australian government has been criticised strongly by the Guardian, declaring that its soft touch contrasts with the approach adopted in the United Kingdom, in France and New Zealand and Canada, where a combination of pricing probes, parliamentary scrutiny and threats of price controls and sanctions are being used to pressure supermarkets and food manufacturers to lower prices. While many sectors of the economy, including airlines and banks, have been enjoying increasing margins during the inflationary period, the profitability of supermarkets really stands out.